I like your cut, G.
Roguelikes, the genre of video game specifically made to eat away at hours of your life, either to accomplish absolutely nothing and just die over and over, or walk away from it having unlocked or completed a ton of challenges and getting that sweet, sweet dopamine. No matter what the situation is, you know you'll be back tomorrow ready to try some more. Just something about them that hits you just right, you know? These games excel at putting you into this completely separate mindset compared to other games. Whereas a good portion of the time you can find yourself blaming lazy game design or poor mechanics for you dying or messing up, roguelikes seem to flip that script, where both you and the game itself know every mess up or death is on you, the player, instead of some game dev's laziness or shoddy work. They constantly push you to do better next time and get just that little bit better at handling obstacles until you can overcome the final boss, before you unlock a new final boss. Anyway, even small victories like being a boss that held you back for a long time, even if they aren't an actual milestone by the game's definition, is immensely satisfying and enough to keep you pressing that restart button. In my personal experience, roguelikes have only gotten better over time. We've come a long way from the classic Binding of Isaac where you just kill the same boss over and over again as each character. We have all kinds of games like Dead Cells where you're tasked with going through whole new areas to defeat a completely unique boss for that path, or Vampire Survivors and its emphasis on having that old school Castlevania feel to it, while also having all kinds of roguelike elements like a ton of unlocks and secrets to find. And there's one of my personal favorites that recently got a massive update in the form of the Dark Mirror, which gives you a ton of new options that single-handedly change it from a roguelite to a roguelike. Now, there's plenty of things I could rave about when it comes to all these great roguelikes as a whole. I want to specifically talk about something that I don't personally think anyone's really mentioned outside of games specifically designed around this principle, and that is player choice. Way to make it sound so important, jackass, Jesus. What I mean by that is not necessarily text boxes showing up with what is supposed to be different consequences for each action you take. What I mean is the choices that aren't really registered as choices necessarily, at least not in any grandiose or complicated way. Simple stuff like, do I want this weapon over this one, or is completing this extra room worth it? Relatively simple decisions that minorly alter your gameplay, but are handled extremely differently across all of the games we're going to talk about today. The most well-known and also simplest game to discuss this topic about would be Binding of Isaac. Now, Binding of Isaac is definitely the grandfather of the roguelike industry, paving the way for all kinds of games we see today, and largely impacting a ton of games even outside of its genre. The choices and progression you make in Isaac are fairly linear, with each run mainly serving to unlock the next step in that pathway, or opening a new branch that's usually just itself and nothing branching off that branch, if that makes sense. This makes it easier to determine goals or plans for how you want your route to go. Trying to beat Hush for the first time? It might be a good idea to take characters that can clear early floors quicker to give you more wiggle room like Judas or Azazel, as long as you get ranged options for Azazel. Trying to get to Mega Satan? Magdalene could easily take advantage of Sacrifice Room to get you key pieces that much easier. Or even Bethany if you want to spend some money on the DLCs, who gets Angel Rooms instead of Devil Rooms to start with. The waters get a little more muddy as you need certain items to be unlocked or certain characters to unlock, as you have to beat each boss with each character to get all of the unlocks in the game, even if it's not the easiest to make that happen. But it helps settle you into the past and understand what you're in for before you have to face a certain challenge with a disadvantageous loadout. Then there are easier choices like clearing rooms to get extra charges on an active item or spending your hard-earned cash in the shops.
Don't forget to leave a tip for old Mr. Crab.
Since Isaac is one of the first to really make roguelikes into what they are today though, its choices and options are relatively simple and easy for anyone to pick up on. Especially since most options are just there, take it or leave it, rather than the other roguelikes in this video where you potentially have multiple different options for each decision. Like if you don't want an item, you could salvage it for extra money or remove it from the run entirely and never see it again. Which Isaac does for you a majority of the time. The next game I want to talk about is the one that actually set the groundwork for me making this video to start with, as I've been slightly addicted to it since the major update came out, and that's Skul the Hero Slayer. This game keeps it relatively simple with player choice as well, offering you options in the form of what rooms to go in for what rewards, what skulls you want to use, and what items you want to prioritize in your limited inventory space. As simple as an item choice is potentially massive ramifications on your build's potential to win, with each item having 2 traits associated with them, where if you get a certain number of items with said trait, you gain some form of bonus, basically a set bonus from MMOs that you might have played before. This creates an interesting ecosystem of items that may not be great with their core abilities, but their traits make them potentially game-changing because they have other items with that trait. Or vice versa, where the traits may not be what you're after, but the main pass of the item is so good that you couldn't possibly pass it up. There's also a completely separate resource called bones that impact your run in a few ways. like being able to upgrade your skulls to have more abilities or make set abilities better, or once you progress into the Dark Mirror some, spending them on altars that buff certain stats for the rest of the run no matter what skull you're using. And there's also Dark Quartz, which you can spend to get game altering buffs, like an execute on bosses or constant healing after clearing rooms, stuff like that. If I'm being perfectly honest, Skul felt a little bare bones. Get it? It's like a joke, guys. Prior to the update, but now it's much more fleshed out with these decisions. All of these things also blend together to make choosing which room feel much more impactful as well. Do you want extra gold so you can buy health or other useful consumables? Or get more items to try and get that perfect build, or just salvage that item so you get some extra gold anyway? Or do you go for skulls to get better abilities to suit your playstyle, or just get extra bones to upgrade the ones that you already have? There's so many extra layers of complexity that really allow each decision to feel a bit more impactful, but also never making it feel like you're making the wrong choice, since they all have a bit of cushion with being able to salvage, since there will always be another shop coming up to give the item what you want. Who the fuck wrote this script? Jesus Christ. Since there will always be another shop coming up that could give the item you want, or being able to get an extra buff to make the coming fights just a little bit easier. This also isn't fully getting all that the Dark Mirror adds, both in terms of replayability and player choice in general. Which is the whole point of the video if I haven't been too boring to listen to up to this point.
You lose! Good day, sir!
Majority of the features I've talked about are actually things you have to unlock through looping through and beating the final boss, each time unlocking another one of these features, like the altar to buff stats with bones, or these potions to get bonuses with gold in the shops. Meaning with each one run you get another option on top of the ones you already have, completely changing your perspective on a certain resource. One run, gold is king and should be prioritized. The next, bones are just as valuable again, constantly keeping you thinking and interested in new strategies that open up as you play. Moving on to our next game is Dead Cells, maybe one of the most complex and unforgiving games for this video. Like, I feel like I can competently play these games most of the time, but for some reason Dead Cells makes it feel like my brain's moving like it's in a vat of glue. But either way, in Dead Cells there are multiple exits in nearly every level that all lead to completely different areas, with separate unlockables, enemies, and of course, bosses. This already means that each run can be completely different in a way not seen by the other two games we've talked about, since you go into completely separate zones every time you play the game. There's also incentive to go down each route, since each level has its own final encounter of the run. And when you beat these bosses, you gain a boss stem cell. Boss stem cells work very similarly to the way Skul works with the Dark Mirror, but with more depth in my opinion. With each stem cell, you get vastly increased difficulty, giving new enemies in each area, limiting the amount of healing you get throughout the runs, and changing boss mechanics to keep them interesting and challenging. But for all of those negatives, you gain benefits too. The amount of normal cells you get is multiplied the higher you go, meaning you can unlock new items more often, along with more unlockable items and cosmetic to spend those cells on. You'll also get more options at the blacksmith, allowing you to improve the quality of items you find throughout your runs. You'll also gain access to doors you find throughout the zones that you can only open with a certain amount of cells active, which serves as little obstacle courses that give you extra rewards like items or scrolls, which are consumables that improve your health and damage with specific weapon types. This whole system is entirely opt-in too. You can play through the game with no boss cells to get a feel for everything the base game has to offer and familiarize yourself with the core of each boss and zone. And then, when you feel confident, you can turn up the heat. The boss cells also serve more than just a difficulty purpose, which is where Skul's Dark Mirror falls a bit short in my opinion, as Dead Cells has more story and plot hidden behind the boss cells. So you're getting more than just a good challenge for your efforts. Finally, Dead Cells also opens up new pathways from level to level, meaning the further you progress through the cells, the more your pathways can change and intertwine with one another, keeping each run even more unique than before. A somewhat newer roguelike on the scene is Vampire Survivors, which doesn't have a system like the Dark Mirror or the boss cell system necessarily, but it gives the player plenty of options to diversify and keep each run fresh or interesting. There's a ton of characters to unlock, with each one having a different starting item but different stat changes that make them all feel unique and all have their own playstyles. Pair this with almost all of them having some form of unlock that range from general buffs like rerolls or banishes that make it so you don't run into a specific item again during that run, to unlocking completely new items that have different synergies with other items for characters. These varying options and paths to go down with different levels with their own set of unlocks means that no run will be the exact same. And you're going in with a plan in mind as opposed to going a certain route because of the items or the pathways that open up to you that you didn't choose yourself, but has a ton of flashing lights and big arrows saying, "Do this thing or get the fuck out!" While Vampire Survivors may be the most unique roguelike that we talk about during all of this, I think it makes it very clear how much it cares about player choice throughout its runtime. The final game we're going to talk about today is Hades and its Pact of Punishment. The Pact of Punishment gives the player the ability to choose how they want to die, as opposed to being given more advantages while also getting more detriments. The Pact mainly serves to keep it interesting in whatever way you see fit, while giving you some incentive in the form of being able to get high value items like Titan's Blood or Ambrosia again after beating certain bosses with this new mode. Hades is probably the best example of truly letting the gameplay difficulty be the player's decision, since you can very easily get all the materials you'd ever need with just some minor changes, like enemies having a tiny bit of extra health or a small amount of extra damage. For each point into the pact, you get another set of the boss items for each weapon too, meaning each tier in the pack can get you up to 6 of each of these boss items, 12 Titan's Blood so that you can get it from the first and final bosses. Some other things get added as well, like Erebus Gates, which are challenge rooms where you have to clear a room without taking damage to get a better reward than a normal room clear. Or, if you're like me,
Beep, beep. Boo! You stink!
this isn't too strong of an incentive and is more of a neat bonus as opposed to a game-changing mechanic. Not to say that it's bad, but it's not as impactful as some of the other stuff we've talked about. All of that to say, I'm personally very excited for roguelikes moving forward, where it seems like the developers have said roguelikes are getting better and better at making each run feel fun and unique, with the goal is to keep you interested in playing for hours on end. It's very refreshing to see games like this going in a positive direction with all the microtransaction-ridden hellscapes around the gaming scene that we've come to know and detest at this point. And with more wonderful roguelikes coming to the genre in the near future like Hades 2, I'm sure this positive trajectory is only going to keep on going, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Now, if you'll excuse me, while I was making this video, I realized that Vampire Survivors had a new DLC, so I'll see you next year. Hi, thanks for listening to me ramble about this stuff. Hopefully you had a good time or enjoyed this in some way. Sorry for the audio kind of going to shit later on. I'm still kind of learning what I'm doing, but it should be better here on out. Hope you have a good day. You're awesome. Wear a safety helmet while you shower, and please get out of my house, sir and or ma'am. Goodbye.